Thank you for joining us today. This is the second in a three-part series on the MICIP process in the platform and focuses on the planning process. Presenting are Dr. Terry Nugent, MICIP lead, and Mr. Tom Johnson, MICIP co-product owner.
Thanks, Ben. So this is Tom Johnson with you, and I'm going to take off from where Dr. Nugent ended in the first segment and pick up her plan and begin to craft the goal and then move into identifying strategies. So I'm going to switch over to the MICIP platform. You should see the login screen just as Terry did earlier. I'm going to log in using my Launchpad. And because I was already logged into my email in this browser today, it just brings me right in. And you can see that we're in the test server, as Terry pointed out. We've got a number of data stories in progress. And we actually, while Terry was working on our plan, somebody out in the field created a test plan. I'm going to move from into the Discover area, look at where Terry was, which was Analyze, and I'm going to sort to the newest strategy. And you can see Terry's right here with student engagement. So that's the work we did in the first segment. And I'm going to jump in. So just as if Terry and I are members on the same continuous improvement team, she's done some work and I can take off from there. I can see her 5 whys. I can move on and review the challenge statement. And now I'm going to go to the goal setting. You'll notice at the top, we're prompted with our data story summary and our challenge statement. Now, as Terry tried to say in the earlier session, be sure not to take our examples literally. We're not going to try and craft perfect goals or perfect need statements, right? We're trying to walk you through the process. And for time's sake, we're not going to try to make the most ideal language in our plan. So the root of Terry's work earlier was around engagement. Her challenge statement came to connectivity. I'm going to circle back knowing that I've got some strategies I can grab for engagement. And I'm going to take us to an engagement goal, but I'm going to try and keep it centered in that the kind of the online and the technology space, just so we stay kind of in that theme. And I'm going to suggest our team might come out of this and suggest that we want to see an increase in reported student engagement of 25%. And then to make this goal smart or smarter, the time bound piece comes over to the right. You set the goal due date. And because MICIP is intended to be continuous, we can set that goal as short or as long as we'd like. And I'm going to actually make it a long one. I'm going to say, we're going to work on this for the next almost 5 years and really make it a comprehensive long-term goal. So I've set a goal of increasing reported student engagement. You may remember, if you saw the first segment, Terry had a student engagement data point. We'll refer back to that in a minute. And then we're asked to name the goal. And this really serves as the name of this initiative as we go forward and as the plan to achieve this goal goes into our portfolio. And so I'm gonna call it increasing student engagement. And I might have a particular theme that goes with that. Am I going to do it through STEM? Am I going to do it through technology? I'm going to do it in reading or writing. But the long and short of it is this is a name that's meaningful to our team, to our district. And then the last thing I'm required to do as I define a goal is to add what we call an impact measure for evaluation. So this is to say, at the end of this initiative in 2025, what do we want to see happen? We have 2 options here. We can do qualitative or quantitative. We can look at an increase in value or a decrease in value. So we're really trying to think about a growth mindset. And when you say decrease doesn't sound like growth. Well, if we're trying to reduce absenteeism, we might look for a decrease, right? And we're prompted to attach it to the data objects from our data story. And this is a really important piece. As you craft your data story, you'll be wanting to think about do I have the data in my data set that I'll need for evaluation and monitoring? So right off the get-go, I said 25%. So I'm going to say, I want to look at the student rigor survey. We've got a baseline survey, and I want to see a student engagement survey. I want to see a 25% increase in the reported engagement by students. So I can put a little description in, and it's at the end of the initiative. Then I can, sorry, I had to zoom out so my screen would fit. I'm going to add another end measure because maybe I also want to monitor math and ELA. So I'm going to say, I'm going to look at this M-STEP data. I want to see a 20% increase in math, and maybe it's math proficiency. And then I'm going to say, I want to say a 15% increase in ELA, but this might be in, maybe it's a 15% decrease in students scoring at the lowest level. So there's an example of you want to decrease the students in level 4. So we've added 3 targets for the end. I'm going to zoom out a little. And then you're also prompted to add interim targets. Now the interim targets are actually optional, but we really anticipate them being in plans, right? If you've got a really short-term goal, you may not need to measure progress in the short term, but most goals are going to be longer term. And we really think we're going to see a lot of interim targets in many plans. So to do that, the prompt looks exactly the same, right? Except that there's also the completion of a task. Well, you might ask, how do I measure a task? Well, these are designed to be only those occasional tasks that are really critical to the implementation, like hiring a new curriculum director, or if you're starting a CTE program and you need a building, the task would be we have to build the building. We don't think we're going to see a lot of tasks, but that option is there. You can do qualitative, so you can do more descriptive, or quantitative. Now, if we think about that, our goal was to increase student engagement by 25% at the end of 2025. And now that I'm in interim targets, I can adjust the dates in any time inside that window. So I'm going to say by this date in 2022, I want to see a 10% increase. And then I can add another interim target. And I'm going to use the same data point, and I'm going to say I want 15% by 2023. I'm going to do one more, say 20% by same time in 2024. So I think you probably get the idea, right? What we're doing here is we're saying we're looking for progression, and these give us benchmark points to stop and check and see if we're making the progress we're anticipating. We might also come in and say, you know what? We didn't use a rigor survey as one of our measures, but really think rigor is important for engagement. So maybe we want to see a 10% increase in rigor reported by students by 2023. So you can use any or all of these data points as measures to track progress along the way. And I'll just throw one more interim in, and I'll use one of the my school data ones, and I'll say we're going to look for a 5% increase by 2023. So we now have crafted a goal to address the need we identified in assessing needs. Once this is completed, then we move on to strategies. And as Terry said in the blue bar at the bottom, you'll notice a change. Once I had all the elements necessary to define a goal, the select strategies button came up. When I click that button, I am now prompted with my challenge statement and my measurable goal. And here the system interacts with a tool we call My Strategy Bank. We have about 250 to 300 strategies right now that have been entered into the strategy bank by the Department of Ed and some of our professional associations, and work is ongoing there, and the number is growing steadily. Local districts and ISDs can also add strategies if they have local strategies that they want to include for themselves. Those aren't visible statewide, but you can add them. So if you have a particular solution and you want to include it in your plan locally, you can do that as well. So keeping in mind that we're looking at student engagement, and Terry talked about the online learning and distance learning. I'm going to go to add strategies. MICIP makes a call over to the strategy bank. I'll zoom in so you can see it a little better. And you can see we have 242 published, and I know we have about 60 in draft. And it gives us an alphabetical list. You can scroll through. So if your team knows something they think they want to look at, for example, if somebody on the team says, hey, what about 21 things, right? Would that help us with engagement? Might it help us with our kids who are learning at a distance? You click on it, and from the strategy bank, it brings over description, whether or not it's ESSA rated, if there's a curator or an owner you could reach out to, and if there are resources. If at this point you decide this is a strategy you might want to include in your plan, you add it for consideration. So you can see what strategies can be utilized to achieve this goal. I'm going to go through and I'm going to grab a few strategies. So I did a type ahead search because I knew what I was after. I can also go over to browse strategies and do it in these buckets: academic, non-academic, and systems, based on how strategies are tagged. If I go to academic and say I go to computer science, I might notice, code.org, we've been talking about that as an engagement strategy. So maybe I pull that up and I see this, and you can see here there are a number of resources available. I'm going to add that for consideration. Again, add strategy. And a plan can have each goal can have as many strategies as you see as is necessary for your district, right? So I added a couple code.orgs. I might, if I'm thinking about engagement, I might look at Project Lead the Way, right? So maybe Project Lead the Way engineering. Again, a strategy with a pretty robust set of resources. So now we have a goal. Our team has done some exploration and found 4 strategies that we're thinking about. And as I said, you can have 1 or more strategies to support a goal. And then the next step in the process, you notice I can't define my implementation plan yet, is this little green plus has us take a look at the hexagon tool. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with the hexagon tool, we've got a link to the NERN website, the National Institute for Research and Education, which is where the hexagon tool comes from. We also have an interactive tool. So if your team's not familiar with it and you go, well, okay, we're supposed to rate ourselves with 5 being the highest, where are we, or where is this strategy in terms of evidence, usability, supports, need, fit, and capacity? We can click on evidence and we get some prompts, just as we did earlier in the initiative inventory. So we can take a look at these questions and make our assessment of the strategy, or our assessment in this case of how does the program fit within the priorities of our school? What limitations might intersect with it? Do we have conflicting? Are we doing other CS programs that might get in the way, or that might be contrary, or we might, struggle to fill schedules, excuse me. As a team gets familiar with it, they'll be able to process through. You clearly wouldn't do this as quickly as I am. And you can use the hexagon tool both to determine whether or not this is the right strategy for you, and where you should put your energy in terms of implementation. If you came in and your capacity was really low, well, your plan, at least the first phases of it, would be all about capacity building, right? So I'm going to take a look at 21 things. I can say the same with code.org fundamentals, right? Evidence and usability are high. There are lots of supports. It really matches our need. The fit's pretty good. Our capacity is not too bad. Maybe we have a teacher who's already trained. I can say include that in our implementation plan. You notice now I can start to build an implementation plan. I'm going to go back up to 21 things and say, you know what, as we talked about it some more, we really do think the fit's fantastic, even though the capacity might be low, and we're going to include that in our plan. And you can leave the others there to come back to in the future, or you can remove them from your list altogether if you've evaluated them. I'll just work with the 2 for now, and we're going to move on to define our implementation plan. So we've set our goal based on our needs. Now we have 2 strategies, 21 things for students. And if I scroll down, did I go by it? I think I did. And the code.org. So I'm going to go through, and you can see it says we have empty fields. The first thing we do is we identify a lead. Who's the person on our team that's responsible for the implementation of this strategy? And then when are we going to start it? Well, we're not going to start it today, right? Let's say we're going to start it in January. And when are we going to complete the implementation of this strategy? And in this case, our team might say, we really want to focus on 21 things for students in the first year and a half, get ourselves ready and do some pre-training with teachers on the other strategy, and really implement that a little bit later once we've built some foundation. So I'm going to say we're going to do this by 2023. And then I can determine, is it in all buildings or does it target a particular building? Now, the building thing is a caveat that's pretty important. If you select all buildings, it's part of your district plan, and it's also part of every building's plan. If I only say I'm going to do this in the elementary school, it is part of our district plan. And at the building level, it's only part of the elementary building plan. So that's how building plans get created. I'm going to select all for this one. Then you're prompted to add implementation activities. Well, what would you put in for implementation activities? You might say train CI team. And you notice the date starts when the strategy starts, and you have the window of strategy implementation to complete it. But I'm going to say we're going to complete this by 03/01/2021. So we're going to get the improvement team trained up right away. Then I'm going to add another activity and say train lead teachers. And I might do that once the improvement team's done. I might start that March 1st and then have that done by June. So I think you get the idea. Then we would train teachers, we might buy materials. We'd probably have some communication activities in here, so we can have them scheduled. The system will, it doesn't do it today, but in the next few months, it will send reminders to the person that's responsible. So they'll get an email as their activities are approaching and or due dates. The same is true of evaluation of strategies and monitoring. Then the team's prompted to just put in an estimate of what are we going to spend on this strategy, and which funding sources do we anticipate using. Now, we have federal, state, and local. You can check as many as are appropriate. We really are here trying to encourage the blending and braiding of funds. And one of the really exciting integrations in the system that's going to be online this spring is a connection to Nexus, which is the new MEG system, which is coming online this winter. Any strategy that's marked for any of the title programs, that data is automatically going to be pushed over into the Nexus system and pre-populate portions of the consolidated application. Now, you might also use some at-risk, Part D, and maybe a little general fund, and maybe your ISD is going to kick in. Then you're prompted to outline how you're going to communicate. Well, we're going to put it in a parent newsletter. We're going to present to the school board, and we're going to do an email campaign. And who are our audiences? Well, the school board, clearly, staff, parents, right, and the community at large. Oh, and all our educators. So if I scroll up and down, you see I completed all the pieces of this, and now it says it's ready to put into the portfolio, but my bar hasn't changed. I'm going to shrink this down. It's because I have another strategy I have to set up, my computer science. So now in this case, I'm going to say Russell rather than Terry. And remember, we said we wouldn't do this till later. So I'm going to say we're going to start mid-year in 2022, and we're going to try and have this up and fully functioning and evaluated all the way out to the end of our goal. But this is the fundamentals. So this is really an elementary initiative. So we're going to implement this, and this will be part of the elementary plan and the district plan, but not the high school or middle school plan. Add activities, just like we did before, right? We would do training, and so on, right? I'm just going to do one for example's sake. And again, each of these can have a different person that's responsible and that gets reminders. We would typically see a pretty good list of implementation activities. How much are we going to spend in funding? This one's not too expensive. It's really about building capacity. We're going to use some Part D funds. And let's say we're gonna use some general funds. This one is maybe really focused on the staff. So that's our primary audience, but we are going to tell the school board about it. Now you notice I have two strategies to address this one goal. Both are ready and they're ready to add to the portfolio. When I click this button, I now go from planning into implementing, monitoring, and evaluating. It pauses me and says, okay, are you sure you've got everything ready to go? We add it. And now it goes to the portfolio page. And you can see that today, I mentioned tests got done earlier. Somebody did one they called X. And then we've got our plan called Increasing Student Engagement with 2 strategies. I'm going to switch back over to the presentation and wrap up. And in the next segment, we're going to take a look at the implement, monitor, and evaluate. So that was planning. And I want to thank you for watching this session. The information to contact either Terry or myself are on the screen now, and we'd love to hear from you.